Today in this video we are going to be discussing how to make darted vessels. So the very first thing that you want to do is figure out the size of your darted vessel. So I've gone through and I've already created this paper template which is 12 by 8, and this is going to give me the height and width of my vessel. So right now we're just focusing on creating a cylinder shape, but when you want to do more than a cylinder shape with ceramics, you can use the darting method to give you a variety of different shapes. So some of the different types of darts that we can create are one-point darts, also known as triangle darts. We have different sized oval darts. You'll notice that the triangle darts are all different shapes and sizes of different types of triangles. This is going to be important because it is going to change the shape of your dart depending on the size and shape of your triangle. So the same thing with the ovals. We have lots of different varieties and shapes of ovals, which will change the shape of your overall vessel. And then we have a few different, like a variety of different shaped darts. So we have the shield dart, the kite dart. The kite dart is very similar to the diamond dart or double pointed dart. Except for the kite dart, you'll notice that the points are shorter up at the top and longer down at the bottom. Then we have a pinched triangle dart, and then we also have a leaf dart. So you'll want to do research and look at some of the videos and PowerPoints and templates that I already have on in the Google Drive for you, because they will show you the different types of results you'll get within your vessel depending on what dart you decide to use. Today for this video, I think I would like to use two different size darts, and I believe that I'm going to use the triangle darts for mine. So to get started, the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you roll a nice even slab. I prepared my template for cutting my sides, so I know that they're nice and even and straight. I'm going to take my template and position it more over to the edge right here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut this template out. So to do that, I want to make sure that I'm holding it nice and steady on both sides, and I'm going to use a carving tool. You can use a metal tool to do this, or even like a plastic tool like this would work really well, but for right now I'm just going to use my metal carving tool, and I'm going to go around. I want to make sure that I am holding the template down, but that I'm really pressing against it to make sure that I'm getting the right shape. Anytime you're cutting a slab, it's always important that you're holding the cutting tool straight to get a nice, solid, straight edge for when you cut. Now I'm going to pull the template back, and now we have a great slab for getting started on creating our darted vessel. The very first thing that we want to do is make sure that we are beveling the edges so they fit up nice and tight when we go to connect them together. So I'm going to take my carving tool, and to bevel the edge, just like always, you want to make sure that you're cutting at a 45-degree angle. So you're just cutting almost like a triangle strip off the end of the clay right here. And then you can remove that piece. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, but remember, you want them to be beveled the opposite direction. So to do that, I'm going to flip my clay slab, and I'm going to bevel in the opposite direction, or in the same direction, but since it's flipped, it'll make it opposite. Okay, And the very first thing that I noticed as I was cutting my bevels is I got a little bit ahead of myself with prepping the slab and going ahead and cutting it down to size. And really what we want to make sure that we do before we go in and create our main shape is we really want to make sure that we are smoothing this texture out that's been created by the canvas and the slab roller. So anytime you have any imperfections, you want to make sure that you're smoothing them out before you go in and create the shape of your vessel. So I'm going to take this plastic rib tool, this rubber rib tool, and I'm going to gently slide over the slab. Now, the next step is we want to make sure that we are slipping and scoring these beveled edges to get our main shape attached. And before we do that, we want to see if it can stand up to create our shape. But I can tell that this clay is super brand new and has a lot of moisture in it right now. So when I tried to set it up, it was super unstable. So I want to go ahead and take a hair dryer to it and dry it out just the littlest bit. We don't want it too dry because we are going to be really manipulating the shapes and we don't want the clay cracking, but we need it to have a little bit more structure. So I'm going to go ahead and take my hair dryer. Let's go ahead and test it out because like I said, we really want to make sure we don't get it too dry. So I can already tell by standing it up like this that it has a lot more structure to it and it's not near as flimsy. The clay is still super soft, so you got to be really careful not to pinch the edges too much or pinch the slab itself. Now what we want to do is we want to go in and slip and score that seam of where we're going to be attaching. So I need to find my comb, and I'm going to dip my comb into the water, and so you can see well, I'm going to position it like this, and typically you would have it facing you so you could see a little bit better, but I want you to be able to see what it is that I'm doing. So remember, to slip and score, you're going to take your comb and dip it in water, and this part does not need to be pretty. The whole point is that you are making kind of some clay glue to help it all stick together really well. And it really doesn't take too much water right now because like I mentioned, this clay is brand new and really soft. Okay, so it's kind of like you're creating some Velcro for this clay seam, and I'm just going to make sure that my fingers are dry because if they're wet at all, it's going to make it slip really slippery. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I'm taking the seams and I'm going to very gently line them up. Lining up the seams right here, and I'm just going to very gently push them together. I'm really just kind of pushing them, like aligning them together and pushing them together versus pinching right now. I want this to overlap a little bit more. So it should look like this at this point. We know that it's lined up really well. And now what we want to do is we want to use one of our rib tools to help us smooth this in. The very first thing I'm going to do is use a blending tool to help smooth that fine edge and kind of press it down to seal it a little bit better. And then we can use the blending tool to help us reach on the inside. This is one reason why it's really great that there's not a bottom on here yet. So we can smooth this out really nicely from both sides, because we'll end up flipping this and smoothing from the other side as well, since it's such a tall vessel. It's still looking pretty rough on the outside here. So I'm going to use this blue rib tool to help compress that seam even more and blend it in where it's not noticeable. So now you have this really great tall cylinder shape. And now what we want to do is I'm going to first work on constructing the bottom. And to construct the bottom, we need to have it facing us so we can see it and manipulate it. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to use the triangle dart or the 1-point dart. And I think for this shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the second to fattest one for the bottom, and then I'm going to use this longest, skinniest one to manipulate the top. And I'm actually going to use them as a template for tracing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut them out so I know that every single one that I make is going to be the correct size. I have my 2 darted templates ready to go. You always want your widest side, like this is going to be the widest side here, is going to be facing up because that's the way it's going to work best on your vessel. So what I will do next is actually I will make the little third marks onto the bottom here, since this vessel is tall. And then I'm going to take it and flip it over and try to make sure I'm lining them up again with the bottom. And we can use a ruler too, if that helps. Just to make sure that it's lined up. And you can go ahead and make your marks at the bottom as well, because I'm going to be putting 3 darts in the top and 3 darts at the bottom. They're just going to be different shapes. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to fold this dart in half so I know exactly where the center of it is, so I can place it on the center of the line that I marked onto my clay. You could draw it if that is easier for you, especially if you drew out your own dart shapes. So now I'm placing that against the lip right here, and I'm going to go in and trace around this triangle. I'm just going to trace. I'm not going to try to cut while I'm holding it on here, because that's a lot and you want to make sure that you're cutting accurately. So I'm just going to trace first. So I'm going to remove it, and now you can see where I have that triangle showing. And now I'm going to go around and do that at all 3 of my marks. And now I have all of those areas traced, and I'm going to go through and cut them. The next thing that you are going to do is you are now going to connect these together And before you connect them together, remember anytime you are putting two pieces of clay and fusing them together, you definitely want to score and slip. So I'm going to take my comb again, and I'm going to score the inside of these, of where they're going to be touching. What I'm going to do is I'm going to very gently, this is going to form a nice triangle shape since we cut out 3. And now what you want to do is you want to very gently, because remember we still want to keep that clay slab nice and free of finger indents, but you're very gently going to go around and pinch these seams together. If you get excess clay, that's okay, we'll wipe that away later. Now we do want to create a bottom for this, so I'm just curious as to how well this is going to fit for the bottom. And it's not quite the right shape because this is longer on this side and short on this side, where this is the exact opposite. But I do think that I could manipulate the shape and just kind of cut right here and make it fit well to patch up that bottom. So I trimmed that in, and I actually think I might bevel the edges of this a little bit more so I can slip and score and just like fit it in really nicely. I think that fits in there really very pretty well. So I'm just going to go ahead and score and slip here and here. So you want to be really careful to not press down into the center because obviously nothing is there to help hold that structure. So what you do want to do is you want to use like a blending tool that's rounded, or even your popsicle stick to help you fuse those edges together. So now we have this really cool looking tapered bottom. And to make sure, because that bottom is kind of small, to give it a little bit more structure, I'm just going to very gently, I might actually do it on the canvas, but I'm going to very gently tap to make sure it's flattened out. We can even turn it back over so you can see what that's done, and that's just made it a little bit more secure for standing on such a small bottom. Okay, so what we want to do next is we want to go in and put darts in the same area lined up where we put our other darts, except this time I'm doing a much skinnier and longer dart, so it's really going to be very different with the shape that it makes. Now that we have our triangles carved on all 3 sides, the next step, remember, is to carve them away. And this would have given you a totally different look if you had off-centered the darts and put them in the opposite direction as the bottom ones, which would have been a really cool shape too. So that's why I say you really want to do some research and testing into your shapes. You can even do this with your paper slab to figure out the shape of your ceramic vessel before you get started if you're curious as to what these darted shapes are going to do. but you can look it up online too, it'll tell you. Okay, so remember, who remembers what the next step is before we attach these together? Remember, we've got to score and slip the inside. If you wanted a wider bottom and something that was more sturdy, you might do this on the bottom and then the smaller ones at the top, depending on what shape you wanted. Okay, so kind of like last time, we're going to just kind of automatically pull all 3 edges in, and then I'm just going to gently pinch where they meet up. Okay, it looks like it's leaning a little bit, so the bottom, because I was pushing down, stuck to the wheel head a little bit, so I'm going to move the wheel out of the way. And anytime this happens to your vessel, like at this point it's not that big of a deal. All you need to do is very gently tap the bottom of it perfectly straight up and down to help even it out. And I can see that because the clay is so wet, it's cracked right here. That's okay, we're just going to flip it back over. And you just want to be really gentle the whole time you're handling this. But it's really, I mean, if that's going to happen now, now is the time, because it's going to be really easy to fix it with how wet the clay is. And I think that that probably happened by putting pressure down onto the top of the clay when we were cutting the other darts. So it's really important to be watching all areas of your clay as you're working, because the slab, even when you're really gentle with it, is going to change shape a little bit and could potentially cause some structural issues like we just had.